All right, we should be good. All right, ladies and gentlemen, on Zoom, our apologies, had a little technical difficulty getting things rolling. So let me call to order the February 7th meeting of the Town Council Study Committee and go through the usual opening stuff. Members of the public wishing to participate in the meeting must use their full name for Zoom access. If full names are not used, people will not be allowed to participate in the discussion. The town reserve the right to remove any member of the public from the meeting who doesn't use a full name or acts inappropriately. We are using Zoom for this meeting, which allows for the public to participate in the meeting as an attendee. Attendees will join in listening mode and they can click the raise your hand button if you want to ask a question or speak. I will call on those who have raised their hands, hopefully in the order that they were raised. All questions should be directed through the chair. As a preliminary matter, this is Joe Grouse, Chair of the Town Council Study Committee. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members of the committee, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Caroline?
Aye.
Rachel?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Bo?
Aye.
Kelly?
Aye.
Joe's here. Let's see, Jeremy? All right, he can see us. Donna?
Yes.
Here.
Anticipated speakers on the agenda, please reply in the affirmative. See, Anthony, can you hear me? Can you just give us an eye?
I can hear you. Aye.
Okay, great. John Giorgio. Oh, yes, I don't see John. Is he there? Oh, I'm sorry. John Giorgio?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, great. Good afternoon. This open meeting of the Town Council Study Committee is being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For this meeting, the Town Council Study Committee is convening by video conference via the Zoom app as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating, that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and to take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided to members of the committee are available on the town website unless otherwise noted. And the public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless we make a note during the meeting. I'm going to turn to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, I will give the members of the committee an opportunity to ask questions, followed by members of the public. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking, and please remember to speak clearly in a way that helps generate accurate meeting minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in conversations with other members, actually, please don't avoid that directly. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by a roll call vote. First motion item on the agenda, and quickly because the speakers for both are really 2 hours on our meeting today. Can I have a motion to accept the agenda? Okay. Caroline? Rachel? Aye. Jeff? Bo? Kelly? Joe? Aye. Donna, Tom?
Aye.
The Town Council Study Committee meeting is being recorded. Did everybody get a chance to review the minutes that were attached to the meeting posting that Curtis did last for us 2 weeks ago? Yes. Any comments, questions, edits on minutes?
He has under me saying only about 2% of the people are paying attention. I think that was what Mr. Scott responded to my question, but it's fine. I don't say. I don't think I would know that stat either. So I don't know if that
try to edit that minutes to reflect that. Can we have a motion to accept the minutes as edited? So, Caroline? Jeff? Tom? Jeremy, are you in for Jill today? You're on, you, Jeremy. Jill,
If she is not there, I am here.
Jill,
Can
are
you hear
you
me?
on Jill, are you on Zoom? I don't see you at the moment. There she is. Sorry, I didn't mean to skip over her. Okay. Jill, do you want to, can you express a vote on the minutes as amended? Skip over her. I'll get to you, Bo. Kelly? Those are adopted. All right. We have a busy meeting today. We have two speakers. The first hour of our meeting or so, we have to get Libby and John off to the select board meeting. It's going to be a presentation and discussion regarding the town charter by Libby Gibson, the town manager, and John Giorgio, town council. And then we'll have another presentation when they're finished at about 4 o'clock with the representatives of the Collins Center. I think what I will do is, for members of the public, in terms of asking questions, I'm going to ask you to hold those questions until both presentations are done. For that,
So I'm with the Gibson Town Manager, as Joe noted, and John and I, town council and I, have prepared a presentation. And I'm going to take you through. He's going to jump in as needed. We're happy to answer questions. And we know there's a kind of limited time, so we are happy to come back as well. So our presentation relates to the current form of Nantucket government and a little bit of overview of options for all parties. Although it's really for Collins and our focus on today is what we have now, and some of the details that we want to make sure people know. So, are you able to show it, Jeff?
sure. I can bring it up.
While that's coming up, I'll just start. Some of it's just. So Nantucket's current form of government, as I think you all know, is select board, town manager, open town meeting. And the select board's responsibilities and designations as outlined in the charter or charters, because we have town charter and township, include the board acts as the chief executive board and chief policy making board. They hire the town manager and town council. They act as the local licensing authority and as the town commissioner. You know what asterisk on implementation of that the county commissioners are charged with additional duties in the county and individuals, although there are different officers on county and select board. The board approves contracts that are executed by the town manager. We have a specific process for that. We authorize and approve certain types of real estate transactions. Some of those are transactions that follow town meeting approval. Some of those are transactions that the board can do on its own by charter. They enact local regulations. They have what is called veto power over town manager department head appointments. So very specifically, when the town manager is intending to make a department head appointment, there's a 15-day notification requirement to the select board chair. Within that 15-day period, the board has the opportunity to vote a disapproval of the appointment. And if they don't do that, the board approves collective bargaining agreements, and certain boards can use information. The charter allows for the select board to designate certain committee, board, and commission appointments to the town manager. And so far, they have delegated the authority to make appointments to non-voting taxpayer committee, the Park and Rec Commission, Visitor Services Advisory Committee. And the process for making those appointments, although not specified in the charter, is followed the same way as the department head. The town manager's role by charter is the chief administrative officer. Our charter lays out the provisions for what's known as a strong town manager. And for example, in other towns that have the town manager making appointments, who have appointments, sorry, not
Libby, I'm sorry to interrupt. This is Jeremy. I cannot hear anything. It's all garbled. And I've signed off and signed back in twice.
Is that the case for everybody?
I'm having the same problem.
Me too.
Good. Is this any better? We just moved the mic.
No.
This is Mary Warrow. I also can't hear anything, and I've signed in on 2 different devices twice.
Yeah, there's something wrong.
And yet I can hear you guys who are distant, but I can't hear anyone in the room.
Me too.
Testing.
That's terrible.
If you speak.
Give you
And
guys-
Joe, I have trouble hearing you as well when you were speaking.
Can they hear you, Rachel?
Yeah, it's going, I think.
Testing.
This is how.
I just don't, I wonder if this just needs to be.
No,
No, I can't hear anybody in the room.
no.
And yet people who are distant zooming in, I can hear completely clearly.
Yeah, it's our microphone. That's I did. Can you guys hear us at all now?
Yes,
Yes,
All right, do you want to try, Libby?
All right, can you guys hear me?
yes.
Okay. I'll quickly start over, but I won't say every single thing that I just said. So town council and I have prepared a presentation that gives an overview of Nantucket's current form of town government and briefly reviews options for alternative forms. Nantucket's current form of government is select board, town manager, open town meeting. The select board's responsibilities as designated in the charter include all of the things that are shown on the screen here. And with respect to the items that are asterisked, I just wanted to add that the county commissioners have specific authority under the county charter versus the town charter, same individuals, different responsibilities. And the select board on the last item appoints certain boards, committees, and commissions. The charter allows the board to delegate certain appointments to the town manager, and currently those include the Park and Recreation Commission, the Non-Voting Taxpayers Advisory Committee, Visitor Services Advisory Committee, and I was trying to think there might be one more, but that process follows the same process as department head appointments made by the select board, which by charter, again, the town manager appoints department heads through a so-called veto process, which is that the town manager notifies the select board chair of a pending department head appointment. Within 15 days of the date of that notification, the board could vote a disapproval of the appointment. And if they did vote that, then that would be considered a veto. If they don't, then it's considered approved. And so the same thing goes for the committee appointments.
Does that happen very often? Or has it happened?
It has never happened. It was close to happening, but it never actually happened. One time. The town manager by charter has the responsibility, is designated as the town's chief administrative officer, and in our town, we have what's known as a strong town manager. In some towns, for example, the select board directly makes appointments of department heads. In our town, that is not the way it happens. The town manager manages the town administration departments, and I'm just going to tell you who those are. Those include the following: town administration, like my office, town manager's office, includes housing, real estate, diversity, equity, and inclusion, communications, and the assistant town managers and general office staff. Human resources, police, fire, public works, solid waste, sewer, health and human services, including our island home, information technology, natural resources, culture and tourism, finance, and the planning and land use services department by agreement, and that includes the energy office. Other departments include the county administration, the registry of deeds, and then departments outside of town administration, again, by charter or law, include the school, the airport, water, town clerk, Nantucket Regional Transit Authority, the Land Bank, the Affordable Housing Trust, and the very specific staff of the Nantucket Planning and Economic Development Commission, which include the director, the deputy, and the transportation program manager. The town manager prepares town meeting warrants, the annual operating budget for submittal to the select board. The town manager executes contracts, and again, there's a disapproval process laid out in the charter for that. So as many of you probably know, on a weekly basis, we submit, or whenever the schedule is, we submit a list of what's called pending contracts to the board. And unless the board disapproves them, they are considered approved. Appointment of certain boards, committees, and commissions I mentioned, and there are about 15 other specific duties and responsibilities outlined in the charter. As you know, we have an open town meeting. Open town meeting is all of those things that are listed there. I won't go through every single one of them. We do have, you go to the next slide, Jeff. Thank you. We do have in our town code the establishment of a town government study committee, which is supposed to be established every 5 years. Most recently, that committee issued a report in 2021. There are some recommendations that are pending in a home rule petition to amend the charter for certain things, and it's in the town meeting warrant right now for 2024. So if people want to look at it, they can go to that. Those recommendations in this home rule petition have been approved at the 2022, 23 town meetings. They're awaiting legislative approval. And what we typically do when home rule petitions are pending but haven't been approved yet is just put them on the warrant to get them approved by the voters again, to make sure there's no
Just to keep
conflicts with
carrying them forward
carrying
until,
them forward until the legislature acts. We have not established a new committee since 2021, and I think that the town council study committee is probably considered the next iteration of the town government study committee. A little bit of a history of, oh, did somebody say something?
No.
All right. John, just jump in if you think I'm saying something wrong or you want to add to it.
Okay, will do.
There's a little bit of a history of the town charter, which we put on this slide. The initial charter was adopted in 1996 through a charter commission process, and it was amended in the various years shown there. There are still some items in the charter that haven't really been updated. For just as a quick little example, section 4.4 town administration departments does not really have the current departments all together in there. So at some point that probably needs to be updated, but it's kind of a non-issue as far as administration of the town government goes. Next slide. This is just a list of unique provisions in our charter and some special acts. I've heard some of this bandied about out in the community. And it's sort of been, maybe I haven't really understood what people's understandings are, but I think there's a bit of non-understanding out there in some cases about what exactly is the case for certain things. So this is just a list of how some things were established and some of our unique provisions, like the airport commission can borrow money to fund a local sheriff grants. I've heard that discussed as a reason to have a town council.
to take that away, or to?
No. There was an issue with an airport grant at one point.
Oh, right.
With a town meeting.
Thing.
Yeah, although we've changed that now, so that's no longer an issue. Okay, so then we're just getting into typical town council form of government and how that works. I think Collins Center will probably talk to you in more detail about that. some things to consider with a town council form of government. Just a list of things. This is not all inclusive, but things that John and I were aware of and have been made aware of in other towns that have transitioned or have unsuccessfully transitioned. And then there's just a couple more slides. Ignore that. Thank you. This has a typo in it. A charter or charter, it should just say a charter will be deemed consistent with provisions of any law. And that's just to address concerns about, or not even concerns, just how charters function within the structure of the existing town government.
Libby, could I jump in here, please?
Sure, John.
So this is the language that's taken directly from Chapter 43B of the general laws, and it's a very, very important provision that the committee should be aware of. You know, if you look in the general laws, there are many, many sections dealing with the structure of town government and how powers and duties and responsibilities are distributed among local officials. What this provision essentially says is you can vary those provisions of the general laws relating to the item shown in this slide, and that will be deemed consistent with the general laws. So, for example, if a general law says a particular committee or commission will be appointed by the select board, your charter could provide that appointment is made most likely by the town manager. But those kinds of things can be varied, and it's important because it's a very useful tool to structure your town government in a way that's works best for the town and not necessarily what's set forth in the general laws.
Thank you, John. The last slide is just the recommended process for revising the charter, along with an alternative method. And John could elaborate on that, but I'm sure Collins will as well. So I'm happy to answer any questions, make any clarifications. I can also, John and I can come back to a future meeting if people think of questions.
I'll start. The first question is, you know, one of your early slides, Libby, you talked about how many people report directly to you, and then I think you listed numerous other groups and commissions that the town sort of administratively has to provide either employee benefit, you know, salary, employee benefits. How big is the town in terms of employees? How many people report to you? How many people are in those other, you know, like the Affordable Housing Trust, all these other sort of entities that the town supports?
The town has, I'm going to say in very round numbers, about 600 full-time employees. That does not include seasonal or part-time, and that includes school. And you're right, we handle payroll, for example, for NRTA, Land Bank, Airport, Water, School. They do some of their own processing, but the paychecks come through the treasurer's office, town treasurer's office. How many people report to the town manager? Well, I haven't even counted it up lately, but it's about over 12. And some of those have been delegated to one or both of the assistant town managers. So not all of those people report directly to me, but I obviously have general oversight of whatever their activities are. And there is definitely a lot of interaction with the departments that don't directly report to town administration, like the school, airport, water, town clerk, all of them. And I think we've gotten to a point where, for the most part, I can't say this in a totally definitive way. There is, but mostly a definitive way. There's a lot of collaboration between my office and the departments that don't necessarily, that are outside of town administration. So I don't really see people out there like going rogue or, going down a road that we're not down
So the cats are generally running in the same direction.
for the most part, yes.
Who else? Anybody?
Through the comment by John Giorgio, I didn't quite understand the thing that was very important that the committee was supposed to keep our eyes on. I didn't quite get that.
So you can design a charter that distributes powers and duties among various town officials in a manner that's different than what's provided for in the general laws. That's the shorthand way of describing what I said previously. For example, a charter can set forth which town officials will be elected and which town officials will be appointed. There are some limitations on that. For example, select board members always have to be elected. But you can have an appointed clerk, you can have an elected town clerk. The planning board members can be appointed, they can be elected. The general laws give specific powers to certain statutory boards, like the Board of Library Trustees is an example. And that they're generally independent from the supervision and authority of the select board and the town manager, but your charter can change that. So that kind of thing. It's just really a great deal of flexibility when you have charter provisions, which can be different than what's provided for in the general laws.
And the guiding principle being what is best for the town.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No? I've done.
Joe?
Oh, I'm sorry, Donna. Yeah, I see some, yeah, Donna, I'll recognize you, Donna. Go for it.
Thank you. John, we've been talking about modifying the charter or writing the charter. From your point of view, which would be the most efficient or expedient approach? To modify or write up our own?
So there are two concepts. The point where you are now, you can amend your charter. And this is a good point to describe the three different ways that you can change what's in your charter. The first one is, I'll call it a simple amendment, which requires a 2/3 vote of town meeting. It then is approved by the Attorney General, hopefully. And then it goes on the ballot at the next regular town election, meaning your annual town election. And if it's approved by a majority of the voters at the election, then your charter the change takes effect. That process is only available for charter amendments as opposed to charter revisions. Now, what you're looking at here is a charter revision because you're looking at changing the very form and foundation of town government, i.e. the legislative body. So in order to revise your charter, you either have to elect a charter commission of 9 members. That's done at an annual election. And then that charter commission sits down and writes a brand new charter, basically. And that charter has to be approved by the Attorney General. And then it goes before the voters at an annual election, and it's an up or down vote. The charter revision is either approved or it's not. Okay? The third way of changing your charter is through what's known as a special act charter change. And you can amend your charter, as I described earlier, the 2/3 vote at town meeting. An alternative is a special act charter change. That same process is available for a major charter revision. So what is the process for a special act charter change? And by the way, this is what I would recommend you seriously consider as the best option for you. You would bring forth to town meeting the form of the proposed new charter. And just for simplicity, let's say you want to recommend to town meeting that you change to a town council form of government. You would actually draft the charter provisions. They would go into the warrant and they're approved, but it's done by a home rule petition, a special act of the legislature. You're probably all very familiar with home rule petitions. You have lots of them voted on at town meeting every year. This would be just one more. And it would require a majority vote of town meeting. And if it's approved, it goes to the legislature, the general court, which has to approve it. And there's a process for the legislature to require certain changes. And then most importantly, in all likelihood, once the legislature approves your charter change, and if there are significant changes to the form of government, the legislature will include a requirement that it come back to the town at an election and be approved by the voters. And I would recommend that if you're going to go that route, which is the way I think is the most efficient, I believe, Donna, that was your question. I believe that's the most efficient, that you simply include in that town meeting warrant article a require for adoption of the charter by the voters at the next annual election held after it's approved by the legislature. Does that answer your question, Donna?
Yes, it does. Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. Thanks, Donna. Jeremy, I think you're next.
Yes, Libby, I was wondering if you could comment from town administration on how a change of form of government from your perspective will improve a situation. In other words, are there certain problems that a change of government will actually solve from your perspective?
Good question. I have not really gathered my staff people together to go over that. I have certainly talked to some counterparts in other towns who are town managers with select boards and town managers with town councils. And I think it kind of all depends on the unique circumstances of every individual town. In our town, I suppose the benefit would be you don't have to wait for town meeting for things to happen. So from a purely efficiency point of view, that would, quote, speed things up. However, I also hear from people that the purpose of government isn't necessarily to speed things up. It's to let the people have as much opportunity as possible to weigh in on proposed laws, initiatives, whatever, projects, whatever there might be. So, I don't know that I can really give a good answer to that.
So Joe?
Yes, sir.
Would it be appropriate to ask Libby possibly to think about this and at a later date, present a summary to this committee of what the benefits and the problems solved might be by this?
I'm just going to interject for just a second. I don't know if that's appropriate, Jeremy, to be honest, and John or somebody might want to weigh in on this, but I a little bit feel like whatever I might view as a problem might not be viewed as a problem by the policymakers or the voters or whoever. So I feel a little uncomfortable endorsing one thing or another.
That's a fair comment.
Seems that he's,
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. We're going to move on.
Jeremy might be asking for the case study to compare, like take a sample that we all could agree on that we might make up, that then we would give to maybe a consultant like the Collins Center. And we would, instead of Libby, we would run through all the different iterations of what it would be like if it were town council versus town meeting. And then maybe we could run that by Libby or run it by the consultant to see what we think about that. But I can see Libby's point.
I can too. John, was that a hand raised, John?
Yes, it is. I'm sorry. I had a little thing done to me today, but you know, in the slide presentation, there were a couple of items that were listed, items that are unique to the Nantucket Charter, which I believe were intended to be able to allow the town to react relatively quickly to either acquire property or, in the case of the airport, to incur debt without having to wait for a town meeting. Of course, you know, you've had many years where you've only had the annual town meeting. Sometimes there is a special in the fall, but that's not, well, I hesitate to say it's not typical, but I think more often than not, since at least I've been around, you've not had a fall town meeting. So you should think about a couple of things here. If the speed of government is the issue, but you want to retain town meeting, one of the ways you can do that is build into your charter a requirement for a certain number of town meetings every year. You don't have that now. All you have is a requirement for an annual town meeting. There are many charters that mandate a fall town meeting. I'm aware of a charter, it's actually a special act form of government that actually provides town meeting is continuously in session, but it meets 3 times a year. So if you want to build that kind of a thing into your charter, you can certainly do that. Typically, when you have a fall town meeting, often the fall town meeting is dedicated to, for example, zoning amendments. So you separate, you know, the spring town meeting are all your appropriations, and your fall town meeting it can be zoning, it can be you know, general law acceptances, it can be home rule petitions. Obviously, you don't want to box yourself in so that you couldn't bring a zoning amendment in the spring if it's really appropriate and there's a time reason why you need to get that done. But that's one thing you could consider, is just increasing the frequency of town meeting as a matter of your underlying charter.
John, thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
In your experience, have you seen more centralized town meeting organizational structures, or town meetings with a board or legal representation, or something different than ours?
Well, and I'm sorry, I don't know who I'm speaking to. I apologize.
Sorry, Bo Barber.
Oh, okay. So maybe the Collins Center would be more appropriate to ask that question of, but clearly, I think you have three, basically you probably have 3 choices here. One is to keep a open town meeting, right? I'm sure that's the most common version of town government. Although if you look at towns with populations the size of Nantucket and over, I'm not sure that would hold true. But generally speaking, open town meeting is the most common. Then you have your representative town meeting. It operates just like any other town meeting. You can have multiple town meetings a year. but you elect representatives on a precinct by precinct basis. And then there's what I would call the town council / mayor city council form of government. And those are different, but let's take the town council form of government. You've got anywhere from 7 to 13 elected councilors. They are the legislative body of the town. They essentially do everything town meeting does. And you have typically a town manager who's the chief administrative officer. So it's hard to say, all three of those forms are quite common in Massachusetts. I guess that's the way I would put it.
I don't know, but John, this is a question for John Giorgio and actually Anthony and the folks at the Collins Center. You might think about this. Listening to Libby's presentation and some of the other people we've talked to, creating a new charter, and then here in the case of Nantucket, dealing with all the various boards, commissions, enterprise funds. I mean, there is a lot of detail and a lot of, if you want to get into the weeds, so to speak, detail to deal with. Is it, what do you think is it possible to take the current town meeting charter, town charter for the town of Nantucket under town meeting government and sort of map it over into a town council, a new charter for town council and just sort of map all the responsibilities over as opposed to, going one by one and trying to decide, gee, do we want to change this particular person's job to appointed instead of elected, and just sort of map it over, but do away with the town meeting and just have a town council sort of fit into that plug, if you will.
So there are, Joe, there are lots of examples of town council forms of government. And I'm a big proponent in not reinventing the wheel because of the law of unintended consequences. And so if this committee ultimately comes to the conclusion that you want to recommend a town council form of government, I think you start from scratch. But use some of the examples where they work well. Oftentimes, how well a town council government tends to work, or a representative town meeting for that matter, very much depends on local politics and the local conditions. And you can't legislate those kinds of things. But there are plenty of examples of charters that provide for a town council form of government. And the committee, I think, if that's the way you're going, you would want to take a look at slide 15. There are lots of questions there that you really need to focus on in terms of who's going to do what, who's going to be the licensing commission, what happens with the sewer commission. You have the county commissioner issue. So if you did a broad stroke report, if you will, that said, we want to change to a town council form of government and we want a separate licensing board, whatever, then I think we could assist you. The Collins Center could assist you in finding a form that's been used before successfully. And obviously it has to become unique to Nantucket because of all the unique things that go on in the town and the current charter provisions. But I would start fresh. That would be my recommendation.
Okay, but starting fresh in the sense that there are models out there that other towns have used.
Yes.
That Nantucket could apply, and then, I don't know, sort of, all I can think of is just sort of plug in our particulars and say, well, you use the example of the licensing board. Well, Nantucket does the licensing board this way. The model that we picked did it that way. Use the, switch to the Nantucket.
Yes.
Okay. That would be a practical way of, as opposed to, it just strikes me, we could spend weeks discussing all these little details. So.
Right. I think my recommendation is this policy should look, this committee should look at the big picture policy questions. And then leave it to, not that you're not all very capable and professional, but leave it to the folks who do this on a regular basis, who are professionals, to come up with a form of a town council charter, and use that format. You're going to save a lot of heartache. It's going to reduce the length of the process. You're going to avoid, whenever you start drafting things from scratch, there's always the risk of legal complications, legal challenges. You need to rely upon the benefit that others have, or the experiences that others have obtained, rather than, as I said, the law of unintended consequences by just sitting down and trying to write a charter. You'll be at this for 3 years if you try to do that.
And yet it's weird in our trying to figure out, is this something that we want to do? Our brains want to look at all the different examples and how it plays out so that we can actually compare an apple and an orange. So I think that's why we're all trying to take it on and understand, what are all the unintended consequences? What would it look like? How would the shift of lawmaking change various examples that we've been dealing with just in the last year? And we're all craving examples of that.
May I?
Oh, sure, Donna. I'm conscious of the fact that we're coming up on 4 o'clock, and I want to let John go. So
A quick revision. So John, you're saying we could request some information from the Collins Institute to ask them if they could pair a number of charters that are similar to maybe where we want to go and use that as a template. Is that what you're suggesting? And is that what the Collins Institute can help us do? Real quick.
Well, we'll have to ask the Collins Institute in your second hour, obviously. But again, look at the chart that Libby and I, the slideshow that we put together.
Yes.
Focus on the big picture. What form of government do you think is appropriate for Nantucket? And let's assume it's the town council form of government. How would you address the questions on slide 15, as I said? And you just give that to the professionals and let them come up with something that obviously would come back to the committee, and you'd go through it line by line, I'm sure, but at least it would be in a form that we know works or has worked in other communities. That would be,
I agree.
focus on the big picture and the big policy questions first.
Thank you.
And you may decide you want to just instead make minor revisions to your, well, they probably wouldn't be minor, but for example, if you wanted to mandate 2 town meetings a year, that kind of thing. Or if you wanted to go to a representative town meeting, those are all viable options, and we can provide examples of how that could work effectively and efficiently for Nantucket.
Thank you, John.
Right. Yeah.
Hi, John, Rachel Mandel.
Hi, Rachel.
How are you?
Good.
I just had I guess a quick question. Have you been counseled to any towns that have changed their form of government? And if so, I think we heard from Mr. Dutton that usually there's some kind of event or reason or impetus or some kind of movement in the community that sort of prompted them to start that process. What have you seen to be that reason that starts people into the process of changing? Like a viable reason, not just.
Right. That's an excellent question, Rachel, and there's no simple answer. Okay. I am a firm believer in, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Mm-hmm.
You might want to modify it around the edges, or, make it more user-friendly or whatever. But I would recommend that unless you find a compelling reason why a town council form of government is going to just make it so much more better and efficient in Nantucket, yes, in answer to your question, we've seen many changes. They haven't always been good. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, but you've got to have good, solid reasons to make such a drastic change in the form of government in Nantucket that's existed town meeting for how many years? I don't even know. I should know that, but hundreds of years.
Thank you, John. We have just a couple of minutes. We have a couple of members of the public here in the room. I guess there's a few members of the public on Zoom. Is there any members of the public that would like to ask a question of Libby or John Giorgio? Oh.
Hi, Campbell Sutton, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I know you can hear me. So I had that same question that was just asked, but I was also wondering in the representative form of government, one of the complaints that we've heard, or one of the weaknesses of that, is that representatives don't show up or don't have to show up or what have you to the town meetings that they've actually been elected to be the representative of. And I was just wondering if in a charter, let's say when we're looking at that form of government, whether a charter could address or compel the delegates or the electors to attend the town meeting?
Campbell, I don't think you could compel members to attend, but you could certainly include consequences if they don't. And typically what happens in a representative town meeting is each precinct has a caucus that can meet before town meeting and appoint new members, new elected representatives from that precinct. If, for example, someone resigns or, God forbid, passes away. And I think you could also include attendance requirements as a condition of continuing to serve. It's got to be in the charter, though.
Thank you. And I would just like to say, I've noticed in reading a lot of different town charters that this idea of utilizing sort of a over format kind of thing is used by a lot of towns and then adjusted as for specifics of a particular town. But when you start to look at charters, there's a lot of commonality used, and then there's the specifics for different towns and things. So I just wanted to.
Great, thank you. Any other questions from the public? Hillary?
Yes, thank you. I have a question, which is if the group did end up recommending a representative town meeting, would it need to include in the article or have figured out ahead of time precincts or like how you would divide up the island to have the representatives elected? Does that have to be done ahead of time?
The short answer to that is yes. It's not quite the same. Well, it's not quite the same as precincts for voting purposes, but your charter could address that issue. You would want those precincts to be as nearly as possible to be of the same size. I suppose it's possible that everyone would be elected at large, which is, that's another possibility. But there are a bunch of different models, and just think of a charter as something that gives you a lot of flexibility, Hillary, to create something that works for Nantucket.
Thanks, Hillary. I'm going to try to get, okay, Mr. Dobies, I don't see a picture. Could you, if you have a question, can you make it quick? I want to let our guest go.
Quick question. Is there a significant cost between a town meeting form of government and a council form of government?
John, you have a
Well, I'm not sure what significant cost means. I mean, right off the top of my head, you're going to want to compensate your town councilors. They typically have compensation that is, I believe, more than select board members. But if you're talking 9 or 11 counselors and the town has a budget of whatever it is, 160, 180 million, it's not going to be a significant expense.
You okay, Mr. Dobies?
Thank you.
Terrific. Libby and John, thank you both very much for taking time out of your busy day and talking to us. We may come back to you, but.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Where's Anthony? Oh, there you are.
Right here.
Just as a little preliminary introduction, Caroline and Jeff and I met on Zoom with Anthony and some of his associates from the Collins Center about, I guess it was about 10 days ago. And we asked them to come in and, as we discussed in front of the committee previously, come in and talk to us a little bit about town government structures. So I think some of this, you know, we're going to have heard, but it'll be good to hear it again. And then the Collins Center does act as a consultant and a facilitator for some other towns, and I thought it'd be good to hear what their capabilities might be for us in that regard as well. So Anthony, if you're all set, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to start sharing my screen so that's ready. First, all of us want to thank the committee for inviting us to speak to you. We appreciate this opportunity, and I think they left, but I want to just say kudos to your town manager and town council for a really excellent presentation. We're going to try to do our best to not cover the same ground. I think there may be some overlap, but we've left a lot of the sort of Nantucket specific things to that presentation. Before I get into the presentation, I'll just introduce myself. My name is Anthony Wilson. I'm a public services manager at the Collins Center. I've been there for a little bit over a year. Prior to that, I was the city clerk in the city of Cambridge, Massachusetts. I was a city clerk in the city of Springfield, Massachusetts, and a lawyer for the city of Springfield Law Department for several years before that. And I will turn it over to Patricia.
Hello, thank you for having us. I'm Pat Lloyd with the Collins Center. I've been at the Collins Center a couple of years now. I work primarily on the charter teams and also in our HR practice. My background is as a labor and employment lawyer, but also as a managing editor for a national publisher that provide legal advice to cities and towns. And we're very excited to be here with you today.
Mel?
Hi, good evening, good afternoon. It's Mel Kleckner. And I've been with the Collins Center for a couple of years, mostly working on the structure and organization practice. My professional career has been as a town manager. I was a town administrator and town manager for over 40 years, all in Massachusetts. I recently retired as the town administrator in the town of Brookline after 12 years. So happy to be here this evening.
So I'm going to get right into the presentation. We're going to cover a couple things, just a couple of backgrounds on the Collins Center. We'll go over some of the charter basics, which you touched on in your earlier presentation, the process for doing a charter revision, which you also touched on in your previous presentation, the different forms of municipal government, some trends that we see across the state. We worked in cities and towns all over the state of all different sizes. The possible alternatives or different ways that you can modify your charter that may not be a full charter revision, some concepts that we think it's helpful for committees like this to consider as they're going through this process that helps both the flow as well as getting the best outcome at the other end. So the Collins Center, I'll go through this very quickly, established in 2008 by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to provide technical assistance to municipalities and other state agencies across the state. We're established by the state legislature and placed specifically within the UMass Boston's McCormick Center for Government. We provide management and consulting services. We've had more than 800 projects all over the state, worked in 2/3 of the cities and towns across the state. We cover a number of areas. We're here specifically talking about charter and organizational structure, but just about anything that a city or town needs to do in terms of management and operations, the Collins Center has a team dedicated to providing assistance to. So we worked on charter projects in populations all the way up to 100,000. We're just now, communities up to 100,000 and all the way down to under 1,000. We just wrapped up a charter and organizational structure project in the city of Cambridge, which is one of the largest cities that we've worked in. But we've worked in towns, both with town councils, city councils, mayors, open town meeting, and a representative town meeting. And those projects run the gamut from transitioning from one form of government, let's say a open town meeting to a town council, all the way to looking at just the position of the select board or the town administrator and thinking about what roles and what responsibilities are appropriate in which bucket. So I won't go through all the projects that we have, but here's some of our sort of more recent projects in the charter and structural organization field. And again, they run the gamut. These towns range in size and in location all over the state. I'm going to turn it over to Mel to talk about what is a charter and give a brief overview.
Hey, Anthony.
Anthony, you've heard a lot about charters, obviously.
Mel, I think the chair had a question.
Just a quick question on the slide 6. Of the studies of those, certainly of those examples, how many actually went through with the change? I mean, I'm curious whether it's fairly common that people study these opportunities to change, but how many of these people actually these towns actually went through with a conversion from Form A to Form B?
I don't have the full. I didn't actually put the full stats together, but of the communities on this list, the only one that I'm aware of that didn't go through with a charter form of government change that was a recommendation that came out of the a study committee was Plymouth. Plymouth recently, I believe it was just last year, they concluded an organizational study committee. They put something forward to the community, and it went to the ballot and failed. The rest of them, I believe, they all passed. One thing I do like to, or I would just sort of point out here is there can also be, even if it passes, there are several sort of timing hurdles that can happen with any type of organizational change. So there can be a significant amount of time spent just at the select board or city or town council with the mayor considering what they, if it's a special act, they get to consider what they get to send forward to the legislature. There can be significant time at the legislature as they consider the changes. So if a vote or if a proposal came out, let's say, I'll pick Amherst in 2018, it may not take effect until 2020 or within that time range. So that does happen. But the only out and out charter change that was voted down that I see on this list is Plymouth.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Anthony. So you've heard a lot about charters, but basically what we would like to explain is that they're the foundational document that comprehensively addresses the structure and operation of town government. Some consider it a constitution similar to our federal or state constitution. And as you've heard, there is a wide latitude to a municipality to create a charter in a local government that's responsive to their own unique history, culture, and community. Charters are subordinate to state law, notwithstanding that John has explained that when it comes to structure and organization, there's a wide latitude to what cities and towns can do, but charters cannot violate state law, and local bylaws are subordinate to the charter. So those are two concepts you have to understand. And as you all know, Nantucket did adopt its charter in 1996, establishing now known as the town manager position. So you are somewhat familiar with this process. So I won't read this, but there is a guide to charter commissions that was published by the National Civic League, and that explains what a charter is. And I'll leave that for you to read at a later time. So when you are reviewing your charter, really what you're doing is you're considering your form of government. Is the existing town government structure responsive to the complex and highly regulated environment of municipal government in the 21st century? Now, I know your committee has been developed established by town meeting to develop a council manager charter. And even if that's what you're going to do and you're not going to look at other forms of government, there are still dozens and dozens of decisions relating to the town manager, the town council, how you're going to handle other elected or appointed bodies, how is the budget process and the transition from the town meeting form going to go. And that's where I think the Collins Center can be helpful, because we're experienced with all of these matters and can draft a council manager charter compliant with state and federal law and consistent with evolving values and cultural changes. Now, the process you just heard, wait a second, is this Pat? Are you moving on with this?
Pat.
Pat, why don't you move forward with the process?
Right. Attorney Giorgio really gave you an excellent overview of the process for revising or creating a new charter. But I'd just like to go over it a little bit and kind of set you where you are in the process. There is a process by which, under a citizen petition, an elected charter commission is established. That is not the process that you're going through right now. But that provides very detailed steps, and it avoids the need to go through the legislature, because the charter instead is recommended by the commission, approved by the Attorney General, and ratified by a town election. So it goes through the Attorney General to decide whether the charter is in line with state law, and then goes to a town election. It's a process with very strict timelines and very strict rules for how you proceed. And that's what you used back in 1996. And Attorney Giorgio also mentioned that to make small changes to that type of charter, there is a smaller process by which you go to town meeting and then have it approved by the Attorney General. What it sounds like this committee is charged with doing is probably most appropriate for a special act charter. Often this type of charter is initiated by the select board. In your case, it was initiated by town meeting through a warrant article, and a charter committee was appointed. Now, as part of this process, what usually happens is the committee will solicit input from town officials, boards, residents. It's very important to have input from the public during this procedure. And then once you've made decisions about the bold outlines of your charter, then you can start drafting and presenting a recommended charter to the select board for inclusion on the warrant. The select board submits the charter to the town meeting. If town meeting approves the charter, it goes to the legislature. And if the legislature approves it and signs it, usually the charter proceeds to a town election for ratification. And as Attorney Giorgio said, it's probably a good idea to include that right in the act if you intend to go to an election. It's usually part of what is the effective date? So many days after ratification by the voters. Very rarely will a new charter not have to proceed through the election process, but in almost all cases, it will then be finally ratified by the residents.
Patricia?
Yes.
Quick question. Does the legislature ever turn down people's home rule petitions for charter change, from, open town to representative town meeting, or, or to town council? Is that something that the legislature would ever deny a home rule petition?
It could. There's no guarantee what the legislature will do, but generally when you submit the special act to the legislature, you will have to make a decision about whether you want the legislature to give you an up or down vote, or whether you want the legislature to make recommendations for changes in order to make it more palatable to the legislature, or the legislature will have a process similar to the Attorney General's where they will look at an issue and see if it's going to conflict with state law, or whether, if it does conflict, whether they're willing to pass that charter. So, yes, there are absolutely times that they may reject certain provisions, or they may ask for changes. It's very process dependent. You know, but in general, if they do approve it, they are able to approve, they are able to approve provisions in a charter if they decide that they're willing to accept the ways that it is different from general law.
Okay.
Pat, if I could just add a little bit there. It's just exactly what Pat said. Charters, there's often language that says it gives the legislature permission to make changes or requires them to vote it up or down. The benefit of allowing the changes is that usually someone from the council's office at the legislature will contact town council or the town manager's office and say, we're thinking about making this change and they'll have reasons because of this provision of state law or something of that nature. And they can have that conversation. Now, the risk is, people are always concerned that what they wrote down, what they were trying to achieve gets watered down or gets changed in some fashion. So that's a trade-off. And then the only other thing I wanted to add was on the piece about legislatures voting them down. I'm not aware of a full change of government being voted down at the legislature, but I have seen charters, particularly coming from mayor council forms of government, going to the legislature to change some portion of their structure, and that not passing because they were looking for a 2/3 vote from the city council or town council, it only having 51%, and they want to see the legislature wants to see more of agreement to adopt that kind of serious change.
That's a good point. That's a good point, Anthony. I was also going to mention that we've also seen charters languish in the legislature if there's a particularly contentious provision in it that they're just not ready to make a decision on.
Okay.
Okay. So the next part is really what your committee goes through, what the special act charter process is within your town. For the special act, and we discussed this a little bit, your committee's convened, you will have a work plan, you will consider changes to the structure. As we talked about, this is the process used in your recent study committee charter amendments. And it will be a similar process going through if you decide to make additional changes. As we discussed, the legislature will convert the petition to a bill, and it'll be assigned to a committee. There will be a hearing at which the town and often your representative will appear. And if favorable, then it has to be approved by the House of Representatives and the Senate and signed into law. And as we discussed, the final step will be approval or disapproval by ratification of the charter at a town election in almost all cases. Let's see. So this is a little bit of a repeat of what we already said, and we want to save a lot of room for questions. But in general, regardless, even though you've been charged with providing a charter for a town council, you definitely want to understand the current structure and how that would evolve. So that would be part of your work plan. A public process is very important. If you go to the legislature, they will ask you what kind of public process you had. How will they know that there's been buy-in by the town? There should be some research on other forms of government of other cities and towns who may have the forms of governments that you're looking for. Then there'll be a final written report that includes both the charter language and the process by which you arrived at your decisions in the charter language. And as it says, generally, we find the committee takes about 12 to 18 months for this entire process.
Pat, have other towns, in terms of public input, do they use surveys? Do you use public hearings? Do you use, I don't know. I mean, what are some of the ways that other towns have communicated the fact that this process is underway and, we're having a public meeting, or what are the ways people do it and how extensive?
It really runs the gamut. I would say there are definitely people send out surveys, but also having public hearings just devoted to public input is a good idea. Additionally, we find all sorts of creative ways where maybe 2 committee members will sit at a town fair or festival and answer questions, or hold talking sessions at the senior center, or other small local gatherings. It's very unique to each community. I think you probably have a good idea where people gather, and having smaller outreach sessions combined with formal public sessions is a good thing. Oftentimes, committee members will write letters to the editor outlining their process. There can be social media campaigns. There's a variety of ways, and it often mirrors the ways that you get information out in your own community.
Thank you.
So I'll sort of briefly go over the general forms of government. Your town council did an excellent job sort of doing an overview of this. Just to sort of lay the groundwork, the terms used for different types of municipalities vary. There are a lot of places that are the city named the town of, and things of that nature. So when we're talking about towns and cities in this context, we're really looking at the form on the ground. And so where you see these 2 boxes, the community will fall into the city bucket if it has a city or town council and has a that, if it's a manager or if it's a manager, that manager will report to the city or town council. If it's a mayor, they're co-equal branches. Versus on the town side, generally speaking, anything will fall into the town bucket, where all of the residents have the ability to participate in a town meeting or a representative town meeting that has some smaller number of residents, but not down to sort of the small numbers that you would consider in a council. So, as your town council mentioned earlier, most communities in Massachusetts have an open town meeting. You see right there, the number is 260 of the 300 plus cities and towns in Massachusetts have an open town meeting. Part of this is because of the state constitution. You have to have, if your population is at or below 6,000, you have to have an open town meeting. You can't become a city. And you can't have a representative town meeting. So that's it on the distribution. And this, again, this is, it's interesting, this was already sort of kind of covered by your town council. While numerically most of the communities are open town meeting, most of the state's population are in city forms of government. So you see, it's more than 40%. It's almost half. So that's sort of the distribution based on the number of cities and towns versus the actual people in Massachusetts. This is from the ICMA, looking at the entire country. I would just say that, got to be a little careful here, because the Northeast, we have the open town meeting is actually a particular form of government that's sort of localized here in the Northeast that doesn't exist in a lot of the other parts of the country. But you do see most of the country dominated by what we'd consider a city form of government, with a council and either a mayor or a city manager. So I will turn it back to Mel for the trends.
Thank you, Anthony. So when we do work in communities, they're at different points in the process, but typically When we see charters and people looking at charters, we're seeing the following trends. First of all, to make an organization more hierarchical with the reduction in the number of independently elected officials and boards and centralizing the management. There's a lot of emphasis on budget process, not only between the boards, but the community as well. And that includes a requirement to develop and maintain a long-term capital plan. So some of these things you've seen in bylaws, but more often than not, they're making their way up to the charter. Highlighting the powers of towns the state home rule provides. John Giorgio talked a lot about that there's a lot of wide latitude. And to say that in your charter is important. We're seeing a lot of changes due to emerging technology, primarily in the internet, the way that meetings are publicized and community engagement is engaged with the public. Standardized procedures for the conduct and operation of the town and the boards and committees. We're seeing removal of gender references, and also more often than not, a requirement for a periodic review of your charter and bylaws. We're also seeing removal of residency requirements for certain officers. I know that's an issue with an island government. Also, mechanisms for assuring the charter is enforced, right in the charter itself, defining coordination of emergencies and emergency management activities, a lot of community engagement provisions in charters, and also adoption of initiative petitions and referenda. That would be especially important if you move away from a town meeting form of government to a council form, to still allow your residents to petition and have initiatives. The Collins Center can help facilitate the committee's analysis of all these trends, including best practices and providing sample language. Now, this is what we, the Collins Center, are always trying to achieve when we're doing charters: clarity, consistency, coordination, and accountability. Those are our 4 guiding precepts, and that's how we would approach things if we were working with the town of Nantucket.
So, we're near the end. We're going to open it up for questions, but a couple key items that we like to put forward to the boards and committees is, number one, think about what are the issues, what are the questions you're trying to answer, what are the issues you're trying to fix. That's often a good starting point for committees. I think someone alluded to it earlier in the meeting. You could spend, weeks, months, years looking at all the particular issues facing the town of Nantucket and trying to fix all. It's important to think about, why are we having a town council study committee? What are the issues that we're trying to fix? And does it make sense to fix them or go through certain processes to fix them? That's
Anthony?
Yes.
I'm sorry, can I stop you with it? We have a question from one of the folks on the committee. And do you mind if we just let them ask?
Sure.
Okay, Jeremy, fire away.
Oh, thank you, Anthony. I guess trying to get to the root issue that leads to these requests for change or possibility of change is what I characterize as the problem definition. And your emerging trends chart sort of touches on some of these issues. But I was wondering, on your page 6, where you've got the, about 8 communities over the last decade that have done changes, is it possible to sort of define what is the problem that they sought to correct or improve upon? And was their solution successful? Have you done any analysis on that that would be helpful to us? Because I believe that our electorate are going to ask, why should we do this? We can get the process all done correctly. And you guys have done a great job outlining all the processes we need to go through. But question still remains, why should we do all of this?
That's actually a very good question. So I think the first part of the question, which is the analysis after the fact, just to be candid with you, I don't think that we have the analysis after the fact about, did we measure or did the community measure that this particular action solved whatever the problem was. As to the problem, specifically sort of in a rigorous way, as to what the question that they were trying to solve, I think as Pat noted, what we could do at some point is pull together the reports, the charter committee reports, and we could sort of delineate what are the things that that they chose to fix. And there's a lot of this sort of highlighted in those reports. Off the top of my head, and I'm sort of, don't hold me to this, but looking at this list on number 6 is particularly looking at Framingham, Amherst. Those were changes of government to either a town council form from a open town meeting form, or from one of the town meeting forms. And often what I hear anecdotally, and I love Pat or Mel to chime in, what I do hear is that people or residents felt like they were that the community needs to move faster to address issues, or to grab onto opportunities. And there is a trade-off between the level of citizens have fewer levers of engagement to pull on just because you don't have the open town meeting, but the communities are able to move quicker in some analysis. Pat, Mel, anything to add there?
A couple points I would add is that we have, in looking at all of the cities and towns, not just the ones we've worked with, we have not been able to identify any that have gone back to their prior form of government. Except I believe there's one whose population had dipped back down and they decided to go back to an open town meeting from representative. So that's a little bit of information. But to add another impetus for change is often when when towns are seeing a lack of engagement, when they have an open town meeting and they have a hard time meeting quorum, or they start realizing that it's only a small segment of the population that are actually making these decisions at town meeting because people aren't coming, or they're having a hard time to filling volunteer boards and commissions, or they have a number of elected offices, but yet only have one person running for each position. So it's essentially, an appointed office anyway, because there's only one person involved. So that's another impetus for it, is just a loss of engagement in the town and the need to have a more streamlined form of government. And, as Anthony said, the desire to do things in a speedier way changes the form of government, leads to talk about changing the form of government as well.
Gotcha. So speed and efficiency of government coupled with lack of I guess, electorate engagement. And then from one of your other slides, the whole world is becoming more and more complex, I would imagine. And one needs to rely upon greater expertise within government. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was actually, we're at the end of our presentation. We're going to open it up to questions from the committee. I just wanted to, before I turn the slideshow off, I just wanted to, at the beginning, before we you open it up to us, there was the question about the transitioning from of the numerous boards and committees that exist in town now, and how do you map those over to another form of government if the committee decides to go in that direction. I think one thing to sort of keep in mind for a committee like this is that dealing with the charter does feel overwhelming. There's a lot there. There's a lot that's, this community's had a number of has a number of sort of unique features. In addition, I think one of the more interesting one is being a county in addition to a municipality. But in your charter, in some ways, you don't want to sort of go into the direction of bloat. Everything doesn't have to be answered by the charter. You have bylaws, or if you were to change your form of government, ordinances that can address some questions. So I'm not saying that committee should do this, but in some circumstances, you sort of determine who has the ability to form boards, who has the appointment and removal authority, and then leave it to whatever the process is, whether it's the bylaws or some administrative process of of creating the boards. And then in your transition provisions, as you transition from one form to another, you put in a time for phasing out the old structure, and then put in what will happen with the existing boards or whatever positions we're talking about as you move to your new structure. So there's ways where you don't have to dig into the weeds necessarily. And our recommendation usually is a charter is not a good place for a ton of detail. As your town council stated, you want to think high level, you want to think big picture, and there's a couple of key areas that people usually cover and leave the minutia to the actual on the ground operations. So with that, thank you, and we're open to questions or comments.
Questions, comments for Anthony and his colleagues?
Thank you very much for those excellent presentations, and we were compelled by the Collins Center in the first place, and it's reassuring not only to hear about your work with other such committees and the process, and that you can advise us on what that process tends to look like, but your expertise, obviously, all of you have piles and piles of expertise that we do not have. And we really appreciate hearing how you've put that all together for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anthony, maybe I could ask you to do, I was going to say a sales pitch, but that's not, maybe talk briefly about what sort of elements of the process you've worked on with some of these other towns. I seem to remember when we met a couple, week and a half ago, you can sort of do a little bit, a lot, a meeting, can you maybe talk a little bit about what are the functions or how you've helped other committees?
Sure. So as we talked about in our last meeting, it can range the gamut. I'll start with what I find to be sort of the most common arrangements that we have, which is very similar to what we're doing now. We'll have a team. I think in this case, it'll probably be the three of us who are on the screen now who would be assigned to Nantucket. We would go to meetings as determined by the committee and provide advice, answer questions during the committee meetings. In between the committee meetings, we usually stay in contact with the committee chair to respond to requests for research or information. We provide memos to the committee about any particular topic you want to look at. We try to be helpful in terms of thinking about what is the process, what are the first things we should be talking about that will get us from point A to point B. That's what I often hear from committees. How do I get from where I'm at now at the beginning to actually producing some document within a reasonable time frame? So we provide guidance around that. So that's what we call on a per meeting basis, which includes any number of communications between us and the chair or whatever the designee is between the meetings. And that we usually charge a fixed price per meeting, and then whatever number of meetings you'd like us to attend or you think we cover for the whole contract, that determines the total price. There are other more, and then sort of on the separate sides of that, there's the less engagement where we don't really attend meetings, where we'll get questions, we can respond with memos or or information, where we're not really attending at the meetings and listening. And then there's the sort of more robust, this committee seems pretty engaged and it seems like you have a good number of resources and engagement from your town council and town manager, but there are committees where they ask the Collins Center to sort of facilitate the meeting, sort of kind of do a little bit more than guiding the process, actually sort of push the process forward. I'm not going to say anything against it, but it's your community. It's, you're going to be putting something forward to your constituents or your residents and neighbors. So I often find it very good when the committee has the appearance and it's the actuality of that, they're sort of pushing their process forward, and it's sort of coming from the ground up versus someone coming in like us and telling you what the right or wrong thing is.
Great. Anyone else? Any other questions from the committee?
I'm curious about Pat and Mel. We think of ourselves as being very unique on Nantucket. I'm sure each of your communities that you work with think that. But I think there are some things about Nantucket that make us especially unique and complicated. And I'm wondering, Anthony, and how you assembled the team and what makes Pat and Mel particularly well suited for Nantucket if they were to consult with us.
Well, I guess I don't want to boost any egos, but they're both great. I've worked with them on a number of other projects. Incredibly smart, dedicated, very hardworking group of people. I think Mel in particular has the experience in Brookline working with they're a representative town meeting, but a town meeting form. And while he was there was discussion about transitioning to another form. So he's sort of got, extra on the ground experience in that process. And in addition to the three of us that are on your screen right now, we have a charter team that's more than 12 or 13 people that we bring back, as we hear issues, as you ask us questions. It really is a team effort in providing those responses. But this is a great team. Pat, particularly great writer, great researcher. That's not to say anything that Mel doesn't do that. He does that too, but he's also got that experience in a town form. And as I went through my experience, I've only really worked in cities, city councils, and so on and so forth. So we play off of our strengths.
I would just say, we know town government very well. And, we've read your charter and, we know how Nantucket works. On the other hand, there are some unique aspects, very unique. I think Anthony alluded to the county, and there's other factors. You have special acts. I don't think I've ever seen an act where a body can acquire property without town meeting approval. So these are things that we know about, but we need to learn more about and just find out how we can adapt those unique things into the next charter.
Okay. Any other questions from, Donna?
Thank you so much for speaking to us at our meeting. You definitely are experts at this. Do you have a timeline for something like this? And you've given us, there are several approaches that you offer to a committee such as ours, but timeline, what do you think? How long do you think it would take? I'm curious when you do these or hours.
I'll answer first and I'll let Pat or Mel chime in. So it does vary. It does, it's hard to answer that question because it does vary a lot. It's dependent on the committee and what the committee's trying to do. But Pat, in one of her slides that she mentioned was sort of spot on. It's usually in the range of 12 to 18 months. If I understand your charge, you have the charge of sort of looking at the town council form, whether or not it fits with the needs of Nantucket, and then thinking about what that would ultimately look like. So that's not unusual. I would say the unusual part is that you've got sort of a specific form to actually look at. So that actually sort of, that cuts out some, that gives you more direction than some committees have. So, and again, it depends on how, I don't want to jinx you, but it depends on how well the committee works together. It will depend on, your ability to get the amount of feedback from the public that you think you need to sort of make a decision, things of that nature. But I would think it would be surprising to go beyond 18 months. But anything could happen. Pat, Mel?
Thank you.
All right, any further questions from members of the committee? If not, I'll open it up to the public. Okay, no one's raised their hand. Mr. Dobies, you have your hand up. You have a question for the folks from the Collins Center?
Yes, I'm a community member. I'm not a member of the committee, but from my perspective, our select board is part-time jobs, and they're stretched very, very thin, very different. They have a lot of work to a full plate. I'm wondering if there's, in general, you have an idea of the amount of time, is it full-time, part-time that a city council form of government, those council people would spend?
I would say, and again, Mel, Pat, feel free to jump in here and correct me, but I would say the majority of city/town councils across the state are classified as part-time. They meet, most of them I see meet 2 to 3 times a month. And their meetings, can range for a couple of hours. Now, one of the things they're doing is they're doing a lot of things that you might have done during town council. They're the ones accepting grants, approving land transfers, things of that nature. So it's often a part-time position, and they will meet. Actually, I didn't look to see how often your select board meets, but they'll meet at least as much as your current select board meets. They will probably be larger in the sort of, I would say the average is in the 9 to 11 range in terms of size. And I hope that answers your question.
It does. It's my concern is the complexity of what's happened to Nantucket over the years. You mentioned it's both a town and a county. It's an island. As Caroline mentioned, there's some very unique things here. I find that the job of the select person is very, very complex. And my concern is that we have people who have the amount of time to spend on it and have some skills that would contribute to some of the things that would help us to move faster, which is one of my concerns.
Yeah, and I would say it's at the outset, we have not, I'll have to go back to the archives, but I don't think we've ever worked with a community that was both a town and a county. So that's very interesting and very unique. But the other issues about the complexity of local government and how it has evolved over the past several decades, and having a town council that sort of meets more frequently, larger, can be more representative, and can make larger decisions than you would think for a select board, is often a driving factor for some of these considerations.
Thank you very much, Anthony.
Thank you, Bob.
So I do have some questions, but I'm not sure if they're for the Common Center. My name is Lucy Hatter. It was Rachel's question actually. So was there an issue with what we have right now that, back in the springtime, like why was this brought up to explore this way of government? Was there, what was the impetus behind that? Was it not working? And then also, are we just exploring the town council? Are we going to explore the representative of the town, local town meeting with the 2 meetings that somebody mentioned?
I guess the quick answer, the relatively quick answer, Lucy, is that there was an article in town meeting last spring, composed or submitted by Curtis Barnes, that basically charged the town to create this committee to study other forms of government. And actually, it specifically says, and write an article recommending a change to town council. I'd have to say, and my colleagues could correct me, I don't think we're feeling, handcuffed that the only solution that we could, if Curtis was here, he would probably think this, but, we're not feeling handcuffed that it has to be town council. Although I think Curtis and some of the rest of us may feel that way. But I think what we're trying to do is do a thorough job of examining. There are really 3 forms of town government that Nantucket might consider, one of which is the one we already have, open town meeting. I think we want to research them, understand them, perhaps with the help of the folks like at the Collins Center, try to come to a conclusion as to what recommendation to make to the town and how to write this article, and then go forward.
So, just so I'm clear, so what wasn't working for the open town meeting? What was the issues? Was that not working, the open town meeting?
Well,
Go ahead. Some of the things that were mentioned and that were listed in the warrant article were the lack of efficiency, not being able to apply for grants on an annual a cycle that met deadlines of the grants. there has been concern about the ability of our town meeting to represent all of the voters. We have 1,000 people who came to the special town meeting this last November, which was a good turnout, I heard. But that is a very small portion of the voters. And there is the idea from the warrant article that by changing to a different form of government, there may be a way to actually represent more of the voters. And this is one of the questions that we're trying to sort out.
And will you be presenting something in spring, this spring, or?
I think the easy answer to that is, I think this is such an important subject and obviously so impactful I think the easy answer to that is there will definitely be a presentation at some point, but I think, I don't want to speak for everybody here, I'll speak for myself. I think our intention is to put the best product forward at the end. And if that happens to be the spring, I know the Collins Center have said we're, 12 to 18 months. If it pushes to that 18, I think this is something where bringing a fully vetted choice to the voters is so critical that if it takes 12 months, it's 12, if it's 18, if it's 18, if it's 10, it's 10, but it's about giving people the best choice with the most amount of information to make their own decision about how they want to see the community.
Awesome. You guys are doing a great job.
I had a quick question. Bob's question about the select board, the amount of time that members spend. We know that they spend a lot of time. They meet every week. And we have lots of committees that are appointed. I'm just wondering what happens to that under the town council, what happens to all the committees? Because I know like a lot of select board members are, appointed to a lot of different committees, right? So they're sitting on committees as well as doing their regular work. So I'm wondering, in the town council form, do the council members go to different committees, or is it really streamlined so that the town manager is really, like we saw in Bridgewater, is really sort of the kingpin to it, and that everything falls under there, and that's where all the machinations will happen, and then it pops up to the town council.
I was wondering, Anthony, did you hear that question? And could you comment perhaps on how the various committees and other roles that the select board members currently play, how does that evolve in a town, paraphrasing it this way, evolve in a town council form?
Yeah, I definitely heard the question. Again, it's the unsatisfying answer of that. It varies, but I would say that in town councils, city councils, there often are what are called subcommittees that the body forms, like a audit committee, finance committee. There can be capital planning committees. I've seen circumstances where they've laid out other committees where, let's say, the town council, the school board, and maybe some another entity in the town government has an appointment to. I've seen it most often in like a capital planning committee or it's like a finance committee, where they create other committees that the town councilors are on, or that send reports to the council about a particular topic, so that they are informed. Usually I've seen it around the budgeting process. But it can vary a lot. And you can, I think, as you alluded to earlier in this meeting, Mr. Chair, you can map some of the existing committees to the new form if you go with the new form. And I think primarily where you would pay the most attention in that case, where you're mapping from one place to another, is who's the appointing authority for the committee under the new structure.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay. Looks like Hillary, you got your hand up.
Yes, hi, thank you. I have a question for the Collins Center, and then I just had a general comment for the public comment portion of the meeting, which I can give whenever you're ready to hear that. But my question for the Collins Center is, have any of your clients or even any of your research on deliberative democracies that you do through UMass, have you looked at how to make town meetings work better? You know, how to get more effective deliberative democracies to work, technology's impact on town meetings, these sorts of questions?
So we're not particularly, it's funny, we've I guess we're not particularly focused on research. We're more practitioner focused and on the ground. What I would say in that the work that we have done, I would say, shows, and again, Mel or Pat, feel free to disagree with me, is that they're Matt or Pat already sort of alluded to this. There is a trade-off that happens as communities get larger, because you're used to having a large number of boards, having town meeting, and as the community gets larger, there can be a strain in terms of filling all of these board and committee positions. I don't know if that's the issue in Nantucket, but that can be an issue. There's the issue of expediency in terms of getting things answered. There's a general increase in the complexity of governing generally. It's far more rules and regulations from the state and the federal level that communities have to be aware of. I'm particularly thinking about areas like personnel. There was a time when some communities didn't have a personnel department, and now it's become almost indispensable. You can't do anything without having an HR personnel department sort of look at things. And again, the trade-off is there are less, I wouldn't say that there's less citizen engagement. There are fewer opportunities just because there is a consolidation of positions. And so that's something that you navigate and that we mitigate in the charter through thinking about citizen participation, initiative petitions, things of that nature. Mel, Pat, anything to add there?
The only thing I would add is that we've absolutely, I think your question was particularly about town meeting. And
yeah, I was more asking about for communities that want to stick with a town meeting, but feel that it's cumbersome or it takes too long, or, there needs to be more opportunity to discuss matters in citizens forums ahead of time. Have you advised communities about these things?
And we have certainly seen those issues come up. Unfortunately, there's actually not a lot of research in Massachusetts about what works. However, we understand some different things that communities are trying for town meeting. And some of our charters have included a community engagement provision, which is a relatively, I think Mel mentioned this as one of the newer trends, is actually having some assignment of duties to the city manager or the town manager to how to effectively reach out to people who aren't currently getting information of the town, of how to become more involved. So that's one, community outreach is really one major factor. And, a number of towns are trying, are trying different things, different nights of the week, different times of day, whether a Saturday works or whether, what works. A lot of towns are spreading out town meetings as far as, maybe they were only one day and they might make them 2 or 3 days, so they're shorter and people participate more. So there are a number of things that we've discussed with other towns that have helped them out. But it's very unique to each community, so we'd really want to understand what the particular sticking point is in your community before we'd make recommendations.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I think Nantucket has actually an extraordinary high amount of engagement. This committee was super competitive. It's there are some committees that no one wants to be a part of, but for the most part, you know, the views on select board, it's like hundreds of people are watching the select board. And, you know, we have between 300 and 1,000 people show up at town meeting, which people think isn't a lot compared to our voter base, but compared to, you know, how big a representative, I think it's actually a high number, isn't it?
I think that's, you know, and everyone always wants more, but that is, and I'm sure it varies depending on what issues are before town meeting, but that's not a terrible number compared to some places in the state.
Yeah, it seems like nobody wants to run for planning board, but other than that, we've got pretty competitive elections. But thanks, I really appreciate hearing these ideas for the portion of the work that might consider, you know, drilling down on these problems and solving them in other ways that include a town meeting. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, Hillary. We're a little bit past 5 o'clock. I'm cognizant of everybody's schedules. Anthony, I want to thank you and Patricia and Mel for your excellent presentation here today. You know, I think the most straightforward thing is, you know, you and I ought to chat over the next couple of days on the phone and sort of figure out what next steps might make some sense. I need to check with the boss, so to speak, on budget, but I think, you know, we can work something out. So, you know, we'll chat. And with that, I'd like to let you guys go. And any of the committee members, we really don't have too much else on the agenda. But again, Anthony, Pat, and Mel, if you want to hang up, feel free. And we'll just wrap up the meeting over the next couple of minutes. So
Awesome.
Thank you
for your time, everybody.
Thanks, guys. The only thing left on the agenda is discussing agenda items for the next time, which is March 6th, I think, 2 weeks. And I guess what I would ask all of you is to think about what do we want to do next? What do we want to talk about next? And maybe send me your ideas. And because I've got a few ideas myself. So why don't we do a little one-on-one, you know, anything you think is sort of the good next subject to discuss. And I feel like maybe the next meeting would make some sense that maybe we don't need to take the whole 2 hours, but let's talk about what are the right next steps? What are things that we, you know, that make some sense for us to investigate sort of for the next cycle, and just have a kind of a discussion among ourselves. So,
Okay. Yeah, I think with that too, I think something that we need to start doing soon and later is some sort of public information collection. I think that would be good to add to the next agenda about how we might engage and get people in, whether it's us going to different groups or groups sending comments in, or some way to get a network of what other people are feeling too.
I think that's so important, and I've been doing it just individually, like hearing about people and just literally qualitative research style, going and talking to people. But I think it would be like what they were suggesting, having groups of us to do it, and then to keep track and track it would really help us.
I think it was Anthony said something about letters to the editor. You know, actually one of the things that's been on my mind is we've got not only Inky, but the Current and all these other, you know, daily e-newsletters and newspapers. You know, we could send it doesn't have to be every month, because, you know, I think sending a couple of letters to the editor saying, gee, did you know that this committee was operating, that this is the stuff that we've discovered so far? I don't know, just
I think even if,
but just getting it out there, I think would have some positive impact.
And by way of
Joe?
to the readers, that we're
I'm sorry,
interested
Don.
in what they're saying.
Good. Hi, Donna.
Sorry, I just wanted to say that I think it's time for that, but maybe we could have one person kind of just organize it with everybody's input so that we do have some consistent PR message going out on a regular basis.
I hear you, but that's why I'm saying that's one of the things I think next meeting, as opposed to having any outside speakers, let's try to come up with a list of topics like PR and outreach, and spend some time talking about each and see if we can come up with kind of a plan, an action plan for those, some of these other ideas. Okay. Hillary, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you.
Looked like you were trying to, so.
Yeah, thank you so much. I just wanted to make like a public comment. So I think it would be good for the committee to consider whether or not you should, now that you're really rolling, look at your goal and your vision document and the work plan. I looked at it, it was in the packet. It is unusual, as we just heard from the Collins Center, that the group was formed to look at a specific type of government. And I think everybody has, everybody believes to varying extents, I don't know how much, but everyone believes it's important to look at all forms, and that was also emphasized in a couple of the talks that you heard tonight. I think it would be useful to actually have a vote on the goal and the work plan. And I say that because when you look at anyone from the public looking at the work plan would see, you know, item number 8, propose a plan for raising awareness about a town council. You know, it is, because of the way this committee came about, really focused on a town council. And I think it might be useful to sort of become your own entity by taking a vote on, is our goal to explore all forms of government and propose the best one, including, you know, just minor modifications, major, whatever, or is our goal to propose a town council? Does that make sense? Like, do you know what I'm getting at?
I don't think we can go against
the town meeting article.
I think we'd have to check
specifically
if we can change that from the town meeting directly.
I think it's a subject that we ought to talk about, because we're certainly gathering some information about all different forms, but whether we can, you know, cross the article that set us up, I don't know, but we can certainly ask John Giorgio about that.
Yeah. And when, in response to your question, we are trying to sort that out. I was thinking, no, it's a dictate, and we have to follow that dictate. And why do we? Because the town voted on it.
That's from town meeting. It's not a.
I mean, I think the
It's
other
from our
forms will be
legislative
part of the
body.
natural discussion. It's just sort of organic to mention the other ones, but that's not what it specifically says in a warrant article. So I don't know how
And if I could say
approach
something
that.
back before I go, I've got a couple of meetings to go to. Reading the charter, so all towns have their charters listed, right? So I've read like maybe 20 when I was on the town government study committee. So like Bridgewater has a charter that would, when you read it, it tells you like how that town council varies from the charter of an open town meeting kind of a thing, right? So there's a lot of forms out there, but it helps you get an idea of what they look like, and what they talk about, and where committees fit in, and that whole power structure. Just as a basis to give yourself some idea of what they look like, how you would use it, or how you could adjust them, or if there are ones you like. Because some town charters are written very nicely and you think, oh, I like that one. You know what I mean? So, because they do all list different goals and stuff like that. I just encourage reading those, or take one.
Right. We have one last. Mary, you've had your hand up patiently. We're starting to lose members here, so.
Thank you. I'm co-secretary of the Nantucket Civic League, and in listening, I've listened to a couple of your meetings and brought what your discussions have been to the executive committee of the Nantucket Civic League. We had a meeting on Monday, and I think Bob Dobies is also on. He's on our executive committee. Anyway, there was a discussion about this, about your work. And I was mindful of your previous statements about the desire to propagate information about your work to other people. I just wanted to say that there was a consensus at our executive committee meeting to give you guys an invitation to meet with either with our executive committee and potentially with our board of directors. Our board of directors are the presidents of 25 local area associations on Nantucket. They represent something like 2,000 dues paying members of the Civic League. And we really would very much like to cooperate with you and assist in any way that we can to kind of get your message out and give information about your committee. We have a big mailing list, and we have a lot of people in our organization that are very civic-minded and active, and we're eager to participate and encourage other people to participate. So that would be coming your way. And is there a particular person that we should direct our chair? Okay, we will. So you'll be getting something.
Very supportive to hear that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, we would love to take you up on that.
Okay.
All righty. Thank you, Mary. Everybody ready to go? I have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right, Caroline.
Aye.
Rachel.
Aye.
Jeff.
Aye.
Bo. Donna. Oh, actually,
Aye.
Donna, I do that, well, honorary vote. Jeremy.
Aye.
That's okay, I'll take it.
All righty, meeting's adjourned. We'll see everybody in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Any and all suggestions for discussion topics for next meeting, please send them along.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, everybody.